Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Let's Talk Trackmania. I am your host, TMScotsman, joined by the beautiful man once again on my left or right hand side, waving into the camera as Mr. Turbo. And we're back for what I believe is week number 18 here. We're back once again for another episode. Today we're going to be talking about, of course, the marquee events which are coming up over the next week. Of course, coming this weekend for the Trackmania Grandleague playoffs finals. And of course, we're talking in the next, I believe it's November 14th to 15th, about Trackmania Grandleague and Open Grandleague merging into the Combine, and also some other events which are happening around about this time. But just before we get started, just a reminder, of course, ESAC.gg brings us this podcast once again. Check them out for any of your current or future tournament plans, projects, or if you want to participate in any sort of Trackmania events yourself, ESAC.gg is your place to check it out, and it is thanks to them and, of course, Erwin behind the screen that we are able to have this lovely podcast. But what is definitely lovely is that I'm joined once again by the beautiful man, as I said. How's Turbo doing today?
Oh, dude, don't do me an embarrass here, but thank you for your warm words there. Yeah, I'm pretty good. Just had a very rough weekend with a lot of casts and a lot of streaming. Yesterday working, but today I'm very happy to accompany you yet again for another Let's Talk Trackmania. I'm good. What about you, man?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I could do it without you for sure, but I'm doing very well. Had a fantastic weekend. I don't think I've done nearly as much casting as you, right enough, but still an eventful weekend. I'm happy with it, and I'm happy that we're back once again for Let's Talk Trackmania. Of course, we've had a lot of events going on throughout the past few weeks. We've got a lot to look forward to in the next few weeks, of course, as we've been talking about. But the main one that's kind of brought us to this conversation today, which we were talking about last week, of course, in smaller detail, but was, of course, Trackmania Grandleague. So I think it's only fair that we start there at what is, the word of the week at the moment. But Trackmania Grandleague, we are at the stage now. This is the final countdown. This is the last remaining week the players have to train. The map pack is out. All of the known all of the quantities are now known. The only thing that will not be known is what sort of shape we're going to see the players going to be performing in this weekend. But Turbo, would you mind for any of those who have not been here with us every single week or have not been able to join in either your or mine casts, giving us a bit of an overview of how Trackmania Grandleague went overall?
Yeah, so it was very exciting, actually. So if you haven't watched any of this and if you don't know the results, I would definitely recommend to watch Step 6 at least.
And close your ears, or else we'll be talking about them.
Yeah. So close your ears. I mean, we had like so many things that were going on. Nothing was decided, and we had also players who dropped down and players that I was really disappointed of. I think both of us, by the names, for example. Spoiler alarm, so I give you a little bit of time to mute yourself. But I think everyone knows about that. So Bran Riolu and also Scrappy and Massa, who have not qualified, and also Tween, but he had a very, very good step. And I think to this standpoint now, I think it is just fair to say that we don't know how this format will go out. So we have this excitement again as before the Trackmania Grandleague has started. Maybe you remember, I think that was our last or second to last podcast with Eric.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just fair to say that everyone could take it, and we could have also seen it in the actual normal format. That's a bit caused by the point system and everything, but we had this debate going on all the time. And now we have the 8 players who have qualified to the actual playoff phase. So, I mean, I can just speak for Peck, but Peck played pretty good, but had his good and bad steps. He had one very, very good step. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about Evon, who have you casted for Team Secret.
Sure. So, I mean, Evon was one of the people coming into this before the season came out. A lot of people put out a tier list. So, who they thought was going to be an underdog, who they thought was going to be a contender for the win, who was going to be battling for playoff spots, and who, they thought was not going to perform. And I think almost everyone put Evon in the underdog slot. Which I think is a very fair representation. So Evon, when we look at him as a player, of course, the Polish player who was representing Team Secret this season, he came out in his second appearance in Trackmania Grandleague, was of course part of Season 1, performed decently in the steps. He was able to participate in Season 1, however he had some connection issues, so people always kind of hung a question mark over his head, like, what is he truly capable of? What can he bring to the table when he's got all the steps under his belt? And of course, now he's able to come into Season 2 with that 1 season of experience under his belt, and also coming into it now, being able to attend all of the steps. However, to a very varying degree of performance, as you were saying there from Pac, it seemed to be a bit of a roller coaster for Evon, it must be said. Early on, he started off a little bit slow, but towards the end of the few weeks, he was starting to perform really well. I believe it was on the penultimate step. He was winning some maps, he was knocking in some fastest laps as well, and he was beginning to become a real contender. And after being quite far behind, shall we say, about step 4-ish, he was right in contention going into the final countdown, basically, and only by a breadth of a few mistakes, as I'm sure a lot of the players would say, but was definitely one of the players which you thought could have made it into the final stages and into the playoffs that we're going to see this weekend. But we were talking about some of the players you were saying there, you were talking about some of the players you were saying there, that were a bit of surprises as not being participating in the playoff stages. But just for those who are maybe not familiar, I've got it up on another screen here. Now you see I'm all green. But yeah, the players who are actually going to be part of your playoffs are from first place, Gwen, representing Gameward. Second place, Carl Jr., representing Solary. Third place, your boy Pac, representing Eminem. Fourth place, Papu from Gamers Origin. Fifth, Afi from BDS. Sixth, Spam from Alliance. Seventh, Aurel from GamingProof.com. And last but certainly not least, we have Kappa from Team Veloz. But, I mean, talking about the top 8 there, we see that, of course, in the top 3 positions, top 4 positions, everyone was relatively well spread out. I mean, Gwen had a massive points lead, of course, and some of the other players were very well spread apart. But we saw towards the 5th to 8th, we're talking, 10, 20 points between them and Disaster. So do you think this top 8 is a very fair representation of, who really did perform best in Trackmania Grandleague this season? Or are you thinking maybe some others deserve the spots a little bit more?
Oh, I think that's actually a very, very good question, because I mean, eventually we can see, I think the prime example for this is Aurel, who lost a lot of points throughout the whole steps. Then also Evon, because Evon was also a player that really got affected by this point loss, and you already named it with the DC he had. But I mean, at this point, it is just, not RNG, but it is also how to cope the pressure. And I think coping the pressure now in the next phase is more important than on an actual 6-lapper, because there you can take safer lines than just in a, I think it's 2-lap format, if I recall it correctly.
Yep.
And I think you can cope the pressure a bit better. So I think the players who are represented in the top 8 are the players who actually have the mindset or the mind of advancing into it. And I think it is fair. I mean, yeah, it is controversial. Again, I think the point system is actually fine, but for a player, it can be very, very discouraging. And also, for example, Evon, he was very, very, this really put a dent into his motivation when he had this TC going on, I think. And just concerning the player base, I mean, would you actually consider that Riolu's in the top 15? I mean, it's unbelievable to see that Bren, Riolu are in 14th and 15th, because for me, they are probably one of the best players out there. So yeah, it could be everyone there in the top 8, actually.
I mean, it's one of those ones that we've seen throughout the season. Last season, we've seen people not really knowing how to deal with the points loss system. So you saw people kind of going all in across all 6 maps. Whereas this season, we've really seen the emergence of, tactical gameplay. And what I mean by that, of course, for any of those who are not familiar, you will be at much more risk of losing points over the 6 maps on the later stages. So, of course, from maps 3 to 4, you can lose 50% of your points. And from maps 5 to 6, you can lose all of your points. So you saw players very much focusing on the later stages as they were able to build up quite a good head of steam without having to worry about any points loss, shall we say, through 1, 2, and 3. However, 4, 5, and 6, where you saw some specific names really turning up the heat, namely Kappa and Gwen, who I feel kind of exploited the system most effectively, especially Kappa, who, as far as I remember, gained the majority of his points that he actually did end up keeping in the final map anyway. With a lot of podium positions on map number 6 of each of the steps, so clearly showing that he's using the format to his advantage rather than anything else. As in the sense of course, if he prepares that much better, then that's one more person he can slide into the red zone, so they can lose all of their points. But I mean, we've talked enough about the actual season itself. We are down to our final 8 players. And I mean, I suppose once again, we have a few kind of similarities going into this. We do have a Carl Jr. going into this, who is not, I believe, last time he didn't get first overall in the group stage. I believe that was Papu last time. But Carl Jr., who's really stepped off the gas at the end of the group stage, and now, I suppose, as much as a question mark you can give to someone like his performance, but a lot of people are thinking, can he really stand up to the test of Papu and Gwen this time? As of course, especially Gwen coming with quite the performance and quite the consistent performance over all of the weeks. Whereas you did see people like Papu and Carl Jr. taking their foot off the gas later on. I mean, if Gwen's going into this with the same kind of fire to keep going week after week after week, then it's a question of, if everyone's going to be able to match that. But also, I mean, you have Kappa scraping into the top 8 once again, as he did on the very first season of Trackmania Grandleague. Sure. And that season, he did get in by a hair's breadth, yet he did end up winning the whole thing. So, I mean, before we even get into any of the format or anything like that, do you have any things you're watching out for in the later stages?
I'm just really want to see how much players can push it and also how they can perform, because you said you don't want to go into the format, but it's a meta change, it's something else. You cannot compare this actual Trackmania Grandleague's qualification with the playoffs itself, since I mean we talked about that last week. We don't know what would have happened if Massa and Scrappy would qualify, because it's a back and forth. We've seen Scrappy, who's the vice champion of Trackmania, or the former vice champion, because the new champion will be crowned this weekend. And I'm also curious to see if the positions will stay like that. If a Kappa, you named it, who is coming in at the last spot, can eventually make it as well. Or someone like Afi or Gwen, who we have not really seen in, not this kind of format, but not in a playoff phase in the Trackmania Grandleague, how they can perform with that. So I'm really interested to see. And also Spam and Aurel, who are certainly not the fastest players, but how can they adapt to that gameplay?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've seen, talking about the format, for any of those who aren't familiar with the rulebook, I'll just give you guys a little bit of an overview. So last season's, it was essentially, it changed. So of course, during the regular season, it's a 6-lap format. So you'd have one track, you do 6 laps on it, and then you get your points from there. And then going into the playoffs phase of at least season 1, the maps would be converted to rounds. So that would be A to B. So they're going along the track just simply in one direction, so to speak. They're not going on laps throughout the tracks. And then they would gain points based upon their finish time in that round. And, just as a typical format, which we're all used to. But now what they've changed it to is they've changed it to a 2-lap format. So you would need to complete 2 circuits of the track. So go through the identity 2 times. Go through the map from a start and from a running start, so to speak, a standing start and a running start. But I mean, talking about the actual format change, so it's not going to be the classic rounds format where you get a certain amount of points and then you get your finalist mode. What's going to happen here is it's going to happen where you'll have, I suppose, a shot for shot almost, so to speak. So what the system is points only go to the player who finishes first. So, pardon me. So, say for example, it's me and Turbo. If I finish first on round number 1 of map number 1, there'll be 3 rounds per map. Then that means I immediately enter finalist mode. However, if Turbo then wins 1 round following that, then he immediately enters finalist mode. and the next person to then win that round will go straight through to the next stage. So, I mean, in the extreme end of this, you will have players who will be able to proceed through each stage of the tournament in 2-round intervals, basically. So basically, I could, well, of course, not that I'm going to be in Trackmania Grandleague playoffs, but say Gwen, for example, could be done with the first stage of the playoffs in 2 rounds. So he wins the first round to get finalist, and he wins the second round to be able to move forward into the next stage. Now, so the way that's going to become part of the whole system is, as I said, there'll be 3 rounds per map, and once the map changes, your points get wiped. So you will then need to get finalist again, and then need to win another round again. So it's definitely quite a big change to what we're used to. The elimination stage of it is that the last 2 players left who do not manage to complete their finalist will be eliminated. Now, this very clearly, as you said there, is quite a meta change. Now, you were pointing out Spam and RLB, players that you think are a bit of a question mark as to how they'll be able to cope with this. Is there any others you're keeping your eye on who might be able to have the upswing compared to Spam and RL perhaps having a bit of a downswing due to the meta change?
Yeah, I think so, because we have seen, but you named them. I mean, there's Gwen. I think he had 10 of the fastest laps, and then also Papu, and I think Spam and, yeah, I mean, Aurel can also push it, but also Spam and Kappa here, I would say they don't really have the fastest laps. They're just consistent drivers, so they need to rely on mistakes, and also to rely on their experience that they kind of have in the game, that they can say, okay, I push it here, and they have to completely risk it. But with the change now, I mean, firstly, so 1 week ago, I thought it's only 1 lap that players are playing, but now it's 2 laps. So it's like 3 minutes of driving. So, I mean, it's somehow you need to be consistent, but you need to find the right way of pushing it and finding the risk. So I think that this format definitely favors players, but I mean, it's 3 minutes of driving, and you cannot drive risky 3 minutes straight. A mistake will eventually happen. I mean, of course, Gwen is, I think, the most risky player out of all of them, but I think they have a fair chance. And also maybe they will like use some new techniques or anything like that. Maybe they figure something out. Yeah. So maybe you give us your opinion about that. You think that there's a player who will majorly suffer from this kind of meta change?
I definitely think there's the 2 main ones which we've been talking about, but also one we've not really mentioned to. So, of course, Spam, Aurel, and Afi, I believe, also will struggle with this. I mean, I look at players who have been their main strength throughout this season has been their ability to consistently finish at top positions. However, players that are often not in contention for fastest laps, I think between them they've got less than 3 fastest laps overall, if I remember correctly. Whereas, exactly as you said there, some players are managing to pull off double figures in the case of Gwen, but I definitely think those players are going to struggle just simply due to the fact that these players are primarily players who've got by and continued through consistency. But I mean, the thing with the new system is, of course, that it doesn't matter how consistent you are over a 6-lapper. It's about the sheer pace you can get out of essentially what would be roughly under 3 minutes now, compared to 8 minutes for a full 6-lapper, for example. But I think it will be not only are we going to see a change in positions based upon just simply what the players are suited to, but also I would paraphrase what Eirik said a while ago, I think it was last week, that you have players like Kappa who will step up the performance when it needs to be stepped up. You will have players like, say, Carl Jr., who would have been letting off the gas a little bit in the later stages. However, he's going to come into these playoffs all guns blazing. And the same can be said for Kappa, who did win the Trackmania Grandleague season on the rounds-based format. Carl Jr., who did win the Trackmania Grandleague on the rounds-based format. These are all players that show they have lightning quick pace. However, of course, now going into 2 laps, but I don't believe the 2-lap change is really going to make as much of a difference this time. But I think Carl Jr. and Kappa are definitely going to, as well as players like Pac, are definitely going to move their way up the rankings a little bit at the expense of players who have got there by virtue of their consistent performances. I mean, it does disappoint me in the kind of sense when we talk about the fact that, yeah, some players are going into this at a lower position because, you know, they didn't put as much effort in. But, I mean, it is going to come into effect a little bit. I mean, we look at the way that the maps are going to be decided. For example, the player who placed 4th overall in the Trackmania Grandleague season will be able to pick the first map of the playoffs. 3rd gets to pick the second map. 2nd gets to pick the 3rd map, and 4th gets to pick. No, 1st gets to pick the last map. I kind of mirrored my way through that there. But yeah, I think it's. I was talking to someone about this previously. One of my main feelings about this upcoming playoff is that it feels like it's going to be interesting. Okay, I don't know as much about the hype and things like that, but it does feel a little bit like cheap excitement. And what I mean by that is, I have absolutely no idea who's going to win it. But it's not because I don't know how good the players are. It's not because I don't know what the players are capable of. It's just that the format is so weird, so to speak. It's so strange in what it rewards that realistically anyone could take it. Any player who's at the top and who is, they're like, as we've made the example of before, you could have someone like Spam who would be, say, the 2nd best player in the entire playoffs, but he wouldn't get past the first round because he would never win a round. You could have players who are getting through. You could have someone like Kappa, Carl Jr., Gwen, you're arguably your favourites for it, going out early on because, all it takes is one mistake. And there you go, over a 2-lapper, your round's over because everyone's going to be risking it. It's just as a case of who's going to be able to keep the coolest head and, make sure the hands don't shake and all the rest of that. But I really have no idea what to expect from this. And what kind of feeling are you getting going into this playoff stage?
I mean, yeah, it is kind of cheap excitement, as you've already mentioned beforehand, but also the fact that the 4th player can pick the first map. Let's just take Papu. He just knows what to do on this first map, and he will just completely blast it out here, wins it in 2 rounds, and maybe then Gwen knows, for example, he's still there all of a sudden on the 4th map. It can possibly be happening. And then he gets so pressurized. Maybe it's a new format. You don't know how players will adapt to that. They practice their 2-lappers, but in the matter of events, it could also be that Gwen goes out. So I think actually it is an interesting format. And by thinking more and more over it, yeah, it is somehow okay. But on the other hand, it's like, there could be just Spam having the run of his life and then knocking out, I don't know, Carl Jr. and Gwen, in the first round. This could happen. It could happen, I don't want to forecast it here. Maybe this will be quoted. I don't know. Maybe it will happen, Everything can happen. And as you've already mentioned, everyone can take it. And it's just a very wild format because now we can see the top 8 of the highest, like the top 8 best players of Trackmania, concerning to the format, of course. And they're playing against each other. I mean, I've already casted this format, but it was like that. There were Hugo and then like some worse French players, who were not participating in the OGL. And then Hugo had a great job, had an easy job. But now I think everyone will prepare for that and everyone is hot because it will not take long. Unlike the previous one, it could be, you could win or you could play 6 maps and you're in the final. This could potentially happen.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Not even just 6 maps. You could play, essentially through the way it would work. As far as I understand, you could play 6 rounds.
Yeah,
and
6
you would
rounds.
be in the final.
True.
Which, I mean, going back to what I'm used to in traditional tournaments, 6 rounds wouldn't even get you halfway to winning one match, even. And the way that I'm traditionally used to seeing Trackmania tournaments. So I definitely think it's questionable. However, whether it's going to be a positive change, as in it's going to bring more excitement, or a negative change, because some of the reasons people are putting forward, or example I'll just put forward now, is it almost doesn't necessarily, but it kind of legitimizes the winner a little bit, because I mean, as kind of Parhelian's put out there, it's going to be whoever doesn't crack in one round who will decide who has the advantage going into the next round. And it could be that you hit spectacular times on 90% of the rounds and are the strongest player in Trackmania Grandleague. However, you may not win. That's why I necessarily think is quite a drawback of this format, which I'm interested to see. But do you know what I think, what I find a little bit funny on this, is that when you look at we always talk about the extreme being that, yes, it could be 6 rounds long. But what about the other extreme? What if, like, people just don't get or people get finalists and they just don't win and everyone just keeps denying them?
Finalists, hello.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think of it this way. You can have a maximum of 3 finalists per map. You could have a finalist winning round number 1, round number 2, and then round number 3. And then it all gets wiped. It all gets wiped and then
really wiped?
As far as I understand, let me just double check.
I don't think so, actually. I think you will keep the finalist mode for the next map, don't you?
I would hope so.
I mean, otherwise it could be a match that we could cast till Christmas or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a little bit of a worry. Let me just double check. So, let me see.
Just win 2 rounds in a row and you're good, is Eric saying. Yeah, just win 2 rounds against 7 of the best players. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
But I think, so from my understanding, it is like that you keep the finalist mode. So let's say you win the first round and then like 5 people advanced and you're still finalists.
Right.
I think.
It seems to be I've misinterpreted that, so that's my bad. But yeah, I mean, when we look at so we won't have to worry about the other extreme there. So we won't have to worry about being there till Christmas, gladly, or else I'd be charging by the month. But I mean, looking at the format as it is, I mean, yeah, when we do look at so many finalists in this, I think that's even just going to bring out even more of a kind of sharp edge from people. But also, when I think back to when I used to watch high-tier tech tournaments, you want to see really, really good and close matches. But I think with a format which is prioritizing so much just on pure pace and risk, you're going to see a lot of players crashing, I think. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's interesting to see who can cope, but I don't want to really see, like, there's 2 players left up at the top because everyone else died, Although one other thing that I do think is going to be very interesting about this, we've seen, back in the first season when Matt would pull out a ludicrous tactic for the identity, just, for some views or just for some fun or something like that. I want to see people going all out on the identities, I want to see what these players can really do. So I think there's going to be some positive aspects and there's going to be some negative aspects. It is, of course, going to be a topic for us next week, a review almost of how Trackmania Grandleague playoffs did eventually turn out. But, I mean, it's got us talking about it. It's got us talking about the ups and downs. But, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, I would say.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. And also how the actual format will work out. I mean, it's the first time we're going to see it. And after that, we maybe know. So it feels like a test step again, or like a test season. But I think after that, we will know the direction how Trackmania Grandleague will go on the 3rd season. And then also the World Cup will be there as well, which will bring back the old format of the Trackmania Grandleague playoffs that we had in season 1. So I'm interested to see that. And I think we will have some very, very close battles, and I think it will create a lot of highlights, but it's again against the players. So I cannot imagine how a player like Afi or even Peck or Carl Jr. will feel if they if they are down and they need to win and need to perform now. There's so much pressure on their shoulders, even for an experienced player, because it's the first time they're playing something like that. And I think we're gonna have a banger of a cast or a banger of a time as a spectator, as a caster on Sunday for both of us. So it will be super, super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, going into the Trackmania Grandleague playoffs, there is Also another side of the coin, so to speak, which will be following up 2 weeks after the Trackmania Grandleague playoffs, which is going to be the Combine. So the Combine will be featuring the bottom 8 players from Trackmania Grandleague and the top 8 players from Open Grandleague. So, I mean, well, my face turns green again. The bottom 8 players looking at this would be Massa from Berlin International Gaming, Tween from Pittsburgh Knights, Evon from Team Secret, Scrappy from Lazarus, Yannex from Edelweiss, Bren from Kameto Corp, and Rielu from Nordavind, and Matt from Space Station. And as my face now turns back to normal, we will also, on the other side of things, be having 8 players coming from Open Grandleague, which does manage to, which all of these players, of course, have been decided throughout the most recent step, which, going in reverse order, you've got Hugo 220 in 8th, Dofault 7th, Tialik 6th, Super Karluf in 5th, Super Karluf and Dark in 5th, apologies, Cap in 4th, Link in 3rd, and why is it not telling me who's second here? Mudda is in 1st. Who was it that was in 2nd again?
I think you messed something up, right?
Well,
it's Granadi in 8th, then Tialic, Dofol, Dark, Cap, Link, Call,
okay,
and Moda.
Yeah. So it's been noted down incorrectly in the Discord, that's all. So yeah, Granadi, would take 8th. Hugo 220 would not be 8th. And Carl would then... Carl was 2nd, yeah?
Yeah, Call is 2nd, then Link is on 3rd, Cap, Dark, Dofol, Tialic.
Apologies, I'll get the right information next time. But yeah, I mean, we've got 8 players there. And to be honest, going into this Combine, I'm feeling a lot more excited about these 8 players. Last time, memory will betray me a little bit here, but last time we had Gwen, Afe, Yannex, Volnera Hydra, we had Ager, and we had 2 others which slipped my mind. I can't remember exactly who, but...
Dofol, Legu, some one of them?
Legu and Tricky. They were the last 2.
Tricky, yeah. True.
So, in last season's one, we definitely had some players who were very clearly going to be contenders over the rest, which was Gwen, Afi, and Yannex. The rest were a bit of question marks. A lot of people were putting Ager forward. However, I mean, having spoken to Ager personally, we knew he wasn't going to be putting as much effort into the Combine. So already we're kind of looking at it thinking that we've only got a select amount of contenders here, but I definitely think a lot of these players who are going to be taking part in the Combine are going to have some real bones behind them to shake up, the positions, and definitely going to be challenging a lot more coming into this season's Combine. I mean, now everyone knows what's at stake. Everyone knows what they need to do. And I mean, what's your kind of outlook looking just at the players who this time are going to be challenging for Trackmania Grandleague spots?
Dude, I was casting step 6 of the OGL, and it was such a mess. I don't know what happened there, but maybe you've seen that clip. Granadi was he was out. He was out going into the last map, and I think it was either Binks or the Razi being in, and he went from 13th to 8th in like the last lap, and this was such a miracle for him. And I think a player that really sticked out to my mind and was the only player who was safely in, like from step 3 onwards, was Moda, who didn't really perform that well on the first map, on the first 5 maps, but then on the 6th map he eventually got his points and has won it by almost 1,000 points. But I think it will be a mess. And then also, I mean, Cap is familiar with this format, and then also going to that we have Dofold, I think, who played last season as well, or Dark, one of them. And then we have new faces like Tialic, Granadi, and Super Kaluf, who are participating for this Combine again. But I think it will be hard to tell who's gonna make it. I think Moda is actually one of the players who has the best chances. But in a format like this, everything can happen, you know? It is a format that does not favor the fastest player, but again, the most safest player. So if you play the knockout, for example, you can get a bug like that has affected Yannick's as well. But I think that everything can happen. And also this head start with the 16 points for Muda, for example, or the 16 points for Massa will be very important for them.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the points kind of gift you get going into it, we did see that being quite important last season. Some those who went into it with a little bit of a head start definitely had quite a good chance coming into this, and the likes of Gwen Affey and Yannick's being in the top did coincidentally end up very close to the top positions overall. And I believe Gwen and Affey actually were first and second overall, with exception of Pack, who I believe got himself in the podium at some point in there. But I mean, going into this, with these 8 players coming into Open Grandleague, I would say across the board, I mean, don't get me wrong, of course, I had very capable players in the first season's combine, but with this, you have a lot of players, a lot more capability for danger, so to speak. You have players who are lightning quick. You have players who are very consistent. Whereas before it felt like you were mostly getting the best of the consistent players throughout this kind of format. And with the Combine using essentially 4 different stages in it, which will test all of the different kind of attributes of the player, pardon me, you will be able to see different players taking spots at some points. I mean, the thing is with this, I mean, you look at players like, say, who would be the best example? Say someone like Mudder, who would maybe have extraordinary time attack pace and single and regular step pace, but may struggle at other points of it, say a knockout format, I don't know. But I mean, it's a very big question mark moving into this for me as to who's going to be able to move up from this season. I mean, talking about the actual the format itself, it is going to remain almost identical to last season's format. It does seem to be there's a little bit of a contradiction in terms of who's going to be able to go up or down, so to speak, as it states initially that basically the bottom 2 players of Trackmania Grandleague go down and the top 2 players of Open Grandleague will go up. However, it does say that if the Trackmania Grandleague players all take up the top 8, then they will all stay in the league. So it will be, I suppose, we'll only truly know who's going to be in and out when it gets to the end of it. It's the same as it was last season.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the things that we, I suppose we talk about who's going to be the most favoured to get into the new league. Who do you think's most favoured to drop out of the old league, so to speak?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely Matt. He's a really, really good player, but I think he really struggled, also making a mistake almost every time in this first corner. And he had so many difficulties, I think, even with his wrist and like coping the pressure. And he does not really seem to be that motivated going into the season. And I think he's a player who could definitely drop out. But other than that, I think actually I don't think that any one of the other players will drop out because they are all so good. And I think if Matt drops out and then let's say Moda or Carl drops in, I think this is like the top 16 players that are battled it out. But I mean, everyone can prove me wrong as well. It could be someone like Granadi who could play out of his mind. And of course, he's also very attractive for organizations because he's a wheel player. He's also like a person in the Trackmania scene. He's well known. And yeah, it could be anyone, but let's say Tween dropping out. This makes like no sense for me, to be honest. So I only really see that that Matt is dropping out. What is your opinion about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to agree with Matt being dropped out. I mean, to be honest, when I initially saw Matt had actually been chosen for Trackmania Grandleague, I did question the decision initially, as Matt is one of the only players as part of this format who doesn't have a specific competitive background. All of the other players were coming from tech, in the case of, players like Kappa, Carl Jr., Spam, so on and so forth. Players like coming from Dirt, so you had players like Papu coming from Dirt, Aurel being very well specialised in both Dirt and tech, and the likes of Bren, say, coming from an RPG/tech competitive background. You had everyone coming from a competitive background, except from Matt. I believe Matt essentially got chosen almost solely upon the Zerator influence, so to speak, as he had managed to get to, I believe it was the final of the semi-final of the Zerator Cup, the final.
I know I was there.
Yeah, he was there, of that tournament. But, I mean, you can't... The problem I always had with that is you can't equate a Zerator Cup this kind of competition. This kind of competition demands a different kind of skill. And I thought Matt definitely would have a chance just simply due to his aptitude for Trackmania, in the sense that he's able to pull off very, very difficult tricks. He's his car control in adverse situations is extremely good, but I didn't think he had the fundamental skill on tech, on dirt, to be able to really match up against all of these other players. And don't get me wrong, being, of course, very young, everyone else having such a head start on him, if he did put in so much skill and he adds that to his repertoire of being able to pull off all these sort of astute tricks, then Matt could have definitely been a force. But we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of hours of practice. We're talking in these specific disciplines to really get Matt up to speed, and especially as he's been going on to have some health problems with his wrist, and being just simply a typical human being who doesn't have all the time in the world to play Trackmania, I don't think he was ever going to be able to get up to speed. And I don't say that in any way to be harsh on Matt. I mean, I'd certainly hope that Matt recognises that himself, as it's just simply the limitation almost of what he's been doing up until this point in Trackmania. It's not necessarily a limitation of what he's capable of, which I think is a very important point. And hopefully, I mean, in this sense, I would say I hope someone does replace Matt, because I don't believe, even still after the second season, Matt is at the stage where he can be a big factor in a full step or a full tournament. But I definitely want to see him in future seasons being able to contend a little bit more. Hopefully, once he's given his body a bit of time to rest, and once he's been able to add a little bit more to his game, so to speak. And I think now, coming through the combine, you're seeing people who are fully well-rounded now. You're not really seeing players with any missing pieces of the puzzle. But outside of that, you were mentioning there about how you couldn't really imagine like some of the big names being out of there. But my kind of problem with how this format works for this situation is that we might have, say, only Matt dropping out and, say, Mudda going in, and you would have the 16 best players of Trackmania Grandleague, which I believe would be true. But you would not, if you were to put all of them as part of Trackmania Grandleague, I believe the combine players would perform significantly better, or marginally better in some cases, than a lot of the players who have finished, especially to the lower end of the top 8, just simply because they're putting more effort in. They're more invested in Trackmania at the moment, or they're more invested in Trackmania Grandleague at the moment. So what I specifically mean by that is you're seeing players who really were not able to live up to their level of performance. You saw Scrappy faltering, and when we're used to seeing him dominating. We're seeing Velu obviously having some issues when we're used to seeing him performing extremely well. I believe now that these players are at risk, they're going to put in a lot of time and effort to stay in Trackmania Grandleague. But what if they then just go back to Trackmania Grandleague and it's again another performance which is 50% of what they're capable of?
Yeah.
In that kind of sense, I would rather have someone like, Dolfault or, Super Karloff coming in, who's a breath of fresh air, and not only that, is motivated and is going to be putting in the hours necessary to be a real challenge in this league. But I don't think we're going to have that, because people are just going to be no-lifing this combine to make sure that they don't get eliminated.
Yeah, so I think the threat again, the not being in danger factor that you can finish up in 16th, that you've mentioned already, or in 15th, and you can still play the combine. Of course, you don't have that head start, but unless you put a lot of effort into the combine match, you are in, and you can okay, 1 year in combine again, but maybe some things occur again in your real life, or you cannot practice that much. Because, of course, Trackmania Grandleague is a format that, deserves the player who puts the most amount of practice into it, kind of, on the one hand. But, if you get the consistency, it is important that you kind of, how can I explain it? Wait a minute. So, of course, someone like, let's say Super Kaluf needs more practice than someone like Gwen to be on their level. But, of course, you need to practice the tracks. And if someone is not practicing the tracks or does not feel like doing that, it will be a hard task. And I hope that for the 3rd and 4th season, the organizers of the Trackmania Grandleague, of course, Nadeo, will recognize who is motivated, who has the fire to participate in that. We've seen players so much, or stepping up so much, but also players stepping down so much. I mean, I can just speak from Peck, who had a lot of things going on in his life, and think of the first season, and that's why he was landing up in the combine. But then he really performed, and now he's performing again. But on the other hand, maybe a player like Riolu, or maybe even Tween, maybe they will perform in the next season, or maybe they won't be a part of it. We don't know it. But I think just having 16 players in the top season is not enough. There should be a second league as well. So from my standpoint, I don't know. It feels like that there's like, it's super, super hard and exclusive. We already had that as well, to come into the top 16, because you cannot really see, like it can be really close for someone. Let's just name Binks, who missed out on that combine match just by a bit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the other kind of factor when you talk about the kind of, which players are going to be going into Trackmania Grandleague and which players are going to be staying in Open Grandleague, is the kind of argument we talked about last season, which I feel was a kind of understated argument a little bit. I ended up talking about it quite a bit, but basically, say you get guaranteed slots, 2 people go straight in, 2 people go straight out. The organisers, the organisations, so teams like Berlin International Gaming, Veloz, Secret, so on, they are the ones who decide stays in Trackmania Grandleague. Yeah. If Lazarus, even if Scrappy does not get does not get in the bottom, but Lazarus then decide, oh wait, we want, as you're saying, say Grenadier, he's more of our kind of target audience representative or something like that, or we believe we can market him better, then Scrappy's gone. It doesn't matter how he performs, other than if he's like top 2 or something like that. Like, unless these people are designated safe by being top 2, then essentially there is still some kind of risk there. But also, on the other hand, is some players who are almost absolved of the risk. Now, that's what we were talking about before. So the only way you would definitely get eliminated in Trackmania Grandleague is if you finish in the bottom 2 overall. So all you need to do is finish essentially from 14th up to 1st. Now, we recently saw that Berlin International Gaming came out and announced the fact that they were then going to be continuing their contract or their involvement with Massa. Now, immediately that means that Massa is under zero danger of losing his spot in Trackmania Grandleague unless he finishes in the bottom 2. And to be honest, I don't like that. I don't like the fact that players are able to have such a secure spot even if they have such a purely mediocre performance. They could get dominated by the majority of Open Grandleague who would deserve the spots a little bit more, yet they would still not be able to be participating in this league simply because, say what the specific player they beat has stronger ties to the organisation than they do. Say, example, it's a French organisation that has a player and just outside of the bottom 2, and a French organisation isn't going to pick up Grenadier. A French organisation isn't going to pick up Mudder. They're going to pick up someone who appeals to their audience, which would be French.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, this is another one of these things that I don't think I have the solution to, but I think that's definitely a problem that I think we're going to see in this league, because before it was a little bit, the top 3 of Open Grandleague performed very well and were in top 4 overall, and the rest of them I think were in the bottom 8. So you could basically say that everyone who deserved to be part of Trackmania Grandleague was part of Trackmania Grandleague. And the rest of them, there was barely anyone else they beat. So fair enough. I can look at that and say, fair enough, the people who deserved it got in that case. However, I think that we're going to see people who are going to be, in the mix, in the middle, say top 6 or something like that, who may not get in favour of someone who gets 12th or 13th or 14th. Yeah. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, it's unfair. It's like player said in the chat, it's gatekeeping orcs and make the game interesting to someone. But I mean, on the other hand, it's hard to find a solution. Let's say Granadi drops in for Massa because Granadi is apparently the better German player in this combine. I don't know. This could happen. And then they're interested in that. But then this means that Massa has no, he's a full-time streamer and a full-time Trackmania player. So you cannot really find a solution for that, and you cannot dump them, the organizations like that. So it kind of makes sense because of the exposure and also the interest. And let's say Trilux is streaming Trackmania. It's a great exposure for the game. So it's like a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, you have the players who are not performing that well, but who are well known in the community, like let's say Massa, but he could also underperform, like you said. He could not be in danger by being all 12th. But on the other, there's a player like Granadi who could potentially end up in top 6 and not qualifying for the Trackmania Grandleague, because there is someone like Massa and maybe then, let's say, Call and Modda who perform better than him. So it is a bit unfair, and I think this demands a second division for the Trackmania Grandleague, that we have players who are the upcoming stars, like Granadi, who improved a lot, and I think something like this should happen, that you like take 10% of the prize pool, or let's say just 5%, but players play in the second division, and then you have to do like a more complex system with the combine and everything. Something like this should work out, but this is like my solution. It's of course very hard to find that, but maybe the chat has also some ideas for that. I think chat was actually very good in this at the past.
Not always, but I mean, like the thing that I would like to see is, I would like to see there be a specific reward or a specific threat to your performance in the group stage. Whereas at the moment, the only risk you take in Trackmania Grandleague by having a tiny amount of points, or last position, is that you don't get any. You get 1 less bonus point, or you get, say, 5 less bonus points than the person who's finished, in a position where they're actually contending for, playoffs. Like, say, for example, 8's, I don't know, 11th place or something like that has only a few more extra points than 16th place, whereas maybe they had like 5 times the points of them in the regular season. I mean, what I would then think, looking at the actual the standings now, I kind of thought about this, and I spoke to a few people about this. It would require a change in the actual combine itself, but I think the bottom 2 of Trackmania Grandleague should just get straight put down to Open Grandleague, and the top 2 of Open Grandleague get straight put into Trackmania Grandleague, and then you fight for the remainder of the spots. That's the way I think you should be looking at this, because you have a punishment for players who aren't putting in, who you have a reason for them to even put in a little bit of effort in the later stages, because they want to make sure that they are not definitely going to be out. And also in this, you want players who are part of Open Grandleague to know that their performances are going to be rewarded. I mean, we've seen Modda being extremely strong throughout the whole of Open Grandleague, yet he could get top 3, for example, in the combine, which would be a great result, and not then be part of Trackmania Grandleague going forward, which I think is bizarre when you look at that he is the kind of player that Trackmania Grandleague needs. Trackmania Grandleague is needing extra players who are throwing a bit of spice into the battles at the top, because you've got so many players there who are maybe challenging 1 out of 6 maps, even if that. So I think maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board a little bit with the combine. The format that we have does work, but I think it definitely could be better. I mean, I guess it all just depends on what goal they're trying to get. As it looks as if at the moment, with some orgs who were kind of left a little bit out of the Trackmania Grandleague overall, that it's showing that Trackmania is in general is becoming a little bit more interesting to organizations, instead of it being season 1 where we had, I think, 2 or 3 orgless players. Now we have more orgs than players. So I definitely think there's capacity for things to be changed up a little bit, for more players to get a slice of the pie, rather than people essentially being handed a bit of a free pass into the next seasons. But yeah, I mean, that's just the kind of way I feel about it. But I mean, do you see something like this changing? Do you think change is a good idea for this? I mean, I know you've spoken a little bit about a kind of second division idea.
Yeah, I mean, just the change that also smaller orgs should have a chance. And I mean, it could be a chance for them to be on the great spot, to have their stream, to have a player who's also like, let's say Granadi, I'm also saying him because he's a prime example of a player who has good exposure on the social media. He uploads videos. And then on the other hand, we had, for example, Revolution, who was not really that up to Twitter, who was not really like a known face. Hardly anyone knows how he looks unless you have met him in real life or you've seen a picture of him. But it's not that easy to find, like something like that. And I think it's hard to find a solution because with a second division, it would be more complex to come in. You need to play at least one season in that. But I think the system of like that, the bottom two and the top two go in or out, like from the OGL and the Trackmania Grandleague, it's a good idea. And then the top 12 in this case then, or the 12 other players will fight it out for the other 6 remaining spots. And then the 7th to 12th goes straight into the Open Grandleague. I think that's a good idea. But on the other, I think you need more seasons than 2 seasons per year, because then it takes so long for a player to qualify again to the respective Trackmania Grandleague or whatever. So it is a hard task or a hard topic, and maybe they will figure something out in the next season. But I think in general, the Combine is a nice format itself because it really rewards the player who is the most consistent. And of course, the Trackmania Grandleague is a consistent format. But it cannot be that it could be that Massa goes or is 14th and is still in the Trackmania Grandleague. So there is something going wrong,
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we have seen through other tournaments, as SRK is mentioning there, that high-level players are definitely out there. And there is a lot of players who can contend for top spots in, these sort of tournaments. I mean, of course, the example they're giving from Zero to Hero, but as that was, of course, only tech. But especially recently, there's a lot of players who are showing that they are very fast on multi-style events. So I think there's room for more players. I mean, it's one of those ones, I think the format does work okay as it is, but it could be looked at. There could be some suggestions taken into account. There could be some changes being made. But it's a question of wait and see, I suppose. We do have quite a little bit of time before the next season comes around, and also an even longer bit of time before, actually, as you were mentioning there, the World Championship comes, or the World Cup, or whatever they're calling it nowadays, is going to be in April, I believe. Is going to be essentially taking the same format as Trackmania Grandleague Season 1 playoffs, making essentially a playoff stage using the rounds format, which we're all used to. So you have to get a certain amount of points, then get your finalist, and then go through. However, 8 players from Trackmania Grandleague will be able to qualify for that directly, and 8 players will be from open qualifiers, which will be open to everyone. I'm assuming also players part of Trackmania Grandleague will have a chance. But, I mean, I suppose that's going to be a developing story as we find a little bit more about it. I mean, we're still going to have a whole Trackmania Grandleague season between now and then, which will be starting in January. I believe it's 24th of January, if my memory serves me correctly from checking it out. But, I mean, we've got a lot of tournaments to look forward to, certainly a lot of marquee events. But I suppose we can round it off with giving our predictions for Trackmania Grandleague. So, shall we say, give me your top 2 for Trackmania Grandleague?
That's a good question. So, firstly, the players are Grand, Carl Jr., Pack, Papu, Afi, Spam, Aurel, and Kappa. So, So my gut feeling is saying me actually that Pack is winning. Pack wins over Afi.
Ooh, bold choice. I don't know why, but my gut feeling's telling me Pack as well. And second of all, I think Kappa. I really subscribe to the theory that Kappa is your kind of guy who will put in the effort when it really counts. And there is no point of which it can count more than this, of course. So, yeah, I'm reckon Mr. Krompulse is up for it. I reckon we're going to have a very, very close fight, though. There's a lot of players who can really, who can really strike fear into the hearts of players in this sort of format. Definitely. But it's always difficult to tell with a format like this. But there you go. Eric can go to sleep now.
Eric again. Imagine not picking Gwen. I think he's gonna cry in bed, or he's gonna laugh. No one is betting Gwen, my boy. And then he's quoting, like, let's say Pack is winning, and then he's quoting something again, researching 20 hours. Oh, I said Pack is gonna win, and then he's gonna put it on Twitter again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna be like, mwahaha, twiddle of the mustache as he, turns his cape into the distance kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, talking, as I suppose we've kind of talked enough about like the kind of Trackmania Grandleague Combine sort of thing that's going ahead. I mean, there's not really much else that's been happening recently, and well, I suppose since last week in Trackmania, that at the very least I've been aware of. Of course, the CPS, the tech tournament sign-ups are closed. There is 2 events, however, I did want to speak a little bit about. First of all, the Trackmania Time Chasers Challengers Series, or TCS. SRK can correct me, he's right here, but essentially the new tournament which is going to be coming around, which is going to utilise different styles, however, not in the way that we've been seeing for the likes of Trackmania Grandleague. We're essentially going to have, teams being made up of, say, a tech player, dirt player, and a full speed player. Oh, wait, I actually got it right. Sick. Anyway, good host, guys, I swear. Anyway, so yeah, you're going to be having all of these different styles being played in the same tournament. However, it should, at least as far as my rule reading skills go, be based upon, the tech player will play a tech match against another tech player and then take a score from that, and then put it up against a score from which the dirt player or speed player manages to get. However, of course, there will be more information coming up about that soon. Sign-ups are still being taken for that, so if you are interested, certainly check out the Discord for that, and SRK, you're welcome to post it if you'd so wish. But do you know one thing I like about this? I like the fact that it's a competition, like the Nations Cups back in the days, that caters to players which are specialised in specific styles. However, you can bring all of them within one team. You can bring a tech player, a dirt player, and a speed player into one team, and they can still play tech, dirt, or speed. However, contribute to the same goal in winning the same match, so to speak, which I think that's what I would really enjoy playing in, and I am going to be playing as part of it. I've got my team sorted, and I understand you to be playing it as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Have you announced your team already or not?
No, I suppose, as far as I know, it's all set in stone. My full speed player would be Don't Care, and my dirt player would be Dunster, as far as I know. And the tech player is, of course, going to be your boy, Sky. What about you?
So I have Javso on my side as a tech player. Then I have Devos as our full speed player. And I'm going to play Dirt, because I can play Dirt a bit. And then also Mini RPG will be between me and Javso. And I will play Nadeo as well, because I really like the campaign. It will be one of the campaign maps. But yeah, it's a really, really good format. But as SRK is saying in the chat, this is super, super stacked. He was leaking some teams in the chat. And I mean, just seeing Afi and Gwen being in one team really made me sad. So there will be a lot of players playing. And I think it can also be handled in a more casual way again, that we can just have fun, just driving it there, having a little bit of fun when practicing together, just playing with people again. And I think it's a very cool format, and really, really cool to see that SRK is, kind of the head of the organization. And really thank you for that. It's really cool that you're organizing stuff like that. And hopefully we're going to play against each other. Hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to
sure
play
you want that?
No, I don't want to play against Dunster on Dirt. No.
Yeah. But there's going to be definitely some very interesting matchups coming out of that. And I don't think we've really had a tournament where you've had teams like that going against each other, which is something I'm really excited for and looking forward to. I mean, you're having trios like ourselves who would never go up against each other in any other kind of tournament, but in this case will eventually go toe to toe. And not only going to be very interested in playing it, but I'm going to be very interested in watching it as well. I think it's definitely going to be something which is going to keep people's eyes peeled. But also, there's been another tournament I wanted to bring up a little bit about, and we'd spoken before how we'd spoken at length, and podcasts in the single digits about how we felt a little bit disappointed at what the previous reach was for communities. We talk about how the French community is ever so dominant now. However, we had tournaments back in the day, and many different regions. Of course, you had a lot of UK regional tournaments. Back in the days when there was actually UK players. Also, Germany, had a very strong region. The Nordics, so to speak, had a very strong region. Benelux. There's been a lot of kind of places that have really had strong footing in Trackmania, but one of the ones which kind of died a very swift death, it felt like, in the kind of past 5 or 6 years, was the Czechoslovakian region. I mean, we've seen extraordinary players come out of that region. Of course, you would talk 2 world champions in Kappa and what's his name, Haki Jr.
Yeah, Haki Jr. Yeah.
Also, some event winners in their own rights of Tween and Danik B. We talk other players, some more former players like Kubais, Horeni, Loso, and so on. There's Michelle as well. The Michelle. But there's been so many players and such a great product that's came out of Trackmania and Czechoslovakia. I don't know why I was about to say Trackmania Grandleague there, but yeah, you know what I'm like, guys. You know what I'm like. But yeah, there's been such great products that have came out of Trackmania in Czechoslovakia that it was very disappointing when we ended up seeing the region in Novus. I actually forgot about Novus. I'm sorry, Novus. But yeah, the region really faltered. However, there has been a competition made up recently, a regional competition within. I believe it's from a Czech streamer. I believe it's the CZC Cup. Maps are all in a sort of multi-style map coming up towards this. And it's essentially being made by a streamer, as far as I understand. Not been able to get as much information about it, as unfortunately all the information has been released in Czech, if I'm correct. However, it's garnering some interest through even some higher tier players within the Czech and Slovakian community. I believe Milmi, Kubais, and Danik B are all confirmed to be playing it, or at least playing the maps so far. And having dabbled a little bit in the maps myself, I believe the majority or all of the maps were made by Michelle herself, who a very old school but very, very, very good mapper, who's adapted, it seems, very well to the new Trackmania and is putting out some high quality maps. So it's definitely a tournament which for me really has came out of nowhere, offering up a prize pool and really kind of maybe putting a jab in the arm of the Czechoslovakian community, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing with SRK and also Danik B on a server in Trackmania Nations. Who would have thought? Because I'm practicing for a competition at the moment, or it was a United server, so it's the United League Reborn, which I'm participating in, and I'm taking it quite serious. I'm practicing the tracks, trying to get consistent on them. And then SRK told me, "Yo, there's some Czech tournament going on," and I was checking out the site, and I was like, "Okay, 1,000 crowns." For the first place, so that's the equivalent of 40 euro, if I recall correctly. Yeah, divided by 25. Yeah, that's correct. Boom, quick maths. And yeah, it's really cool to see something like that because we had the French regionals, and then also this tournament, and then also the Baltic tournaments. But it really that was the first time I really heard from that today. So the first time really a Trackmania tournament for me goes under the radar that I've not seen. So that there's like a community that I certainly don't know of. If you have a French competition, you always get aware of that. You get wind from that. At least that's what is getting posted in the Trackmania news Discord. There you can fetch your information. But with that, I've heard from that today for the first time. I have no idea what the maps look like. I mean, you said multi-style. But it's just super cool that a Czech streamer is putting in the effort to give the prize pool and also to give people the opportunity to map, and that there are players, you've mentioned them, Kubais, Milmi, and then also Danik B, who are participating in that. So it's super good to see, so that we have some new wind in the Trackmania scene. It's really nice to see that.
Yeah, exactly. It is very nice to see, and I think it's going to help breathe life into these new scenes. I mean, that's what scenes need. We've seen the SRK and some others doing great work in the Baltic community.
Indeed.
And as such, I mean, you look at Nordic skirmishers being able to field multiple lineups just by Nordic skirmishers being primarily a Baltic team, and a lot of players really coming out of the cracks, so to speak, and being able to integrate themselves into Trackmania a bit more as a result of some of the efforts being made by the Baltic community members. So I think that if a lot of effort is made in these different communities, that definitely we will see more communities thriving overall. And that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing, if something like this can continue in the Czechoslovakian region, as it has always been a very Trackmania supportive region. I mean, we look at back in the days when the Nest tournament was held, for example, one of the most iconic tournaments in Trackmania.
Nice tournament.
Was held in the Czech Republic, if I remember correctly, by a Czech sponsor, and was a lot of was organised by Czech players and Czech personalities, so to speak. So there's definitely a lot of potential here, and I think it is going to be efforts being made by the community that are really going to get these things up and running. But I definitely think it's something that has a lot of potential, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing. But has there been anything else this week that's really caught your eye or anything like that?
Nah, I mean, there was just a tournament that I was casting. It was organized by the Nasty Trackmania Cup, so an organization that is also a bit new in Trackmania. It had a prize pool of €140, €120, so similar to the tournament that we're talking about beforehand. But I think it went quite good because the maps were fine. Players like Hugo played, Coco won it eventually, and then we had also like some new players here by the name of Asion, who I know, of course, and also Vava participating again. But yeah, I was casting that, and it was a lot of fun. There were some issues from the organizers that they were not able to handle the server that well. There were some difficulties. So one semifinal had 1 hour of delay or something like that. But eventually it was a very nice format. And just nice to see that some new organizations and some new faces are coming into the Trackmania scene. I mean, we have the Time Chasers Cup, which is a kind of revolutionized format again. We have already had that in the past, but still it's a new organization that is bringing up the prize pool, and it's really cool to see that, because I remember us talking about it like 3 or 4 episodes ago. Will the Trackmania organizers will go extinct or anything like that? And I think it's the complete opposite, that new organizers are coming back, maybe even out of nowhere, and it's really cool to see that they are being in the community now. That's really good.
For sure, yeah. And I suppose it almost feels a little bit strange having kind of 2 happy weeks in a row of this podcast. I mean, it always seems to be doom and gloom, and I thought it was just, the blue moon of last week's episode where we got some good news and we can talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it's looking that things are on the ups for these kind of budding communities to regrow and kind of repair the scars of what kind of broke them apart in the first place. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what can happen, and definitely stay tuned here, guys, as we're going to be discussing ongoing developments in Trackmania as always, week by week. But as you've obviously seen today, the times have officially changed now to 8 p.m. starting, and we'll try and bring it into the hour mark for you guys, trying to stack in a little bit more topics so that we're not talking for hours and hours and hours just about one thing, sending you all to sleep before your bedtimes and so on. But I think that's pretty much it from us tonight, guys. Next week, of course, we'll be recapping Trackmania Grandleague playoffs once we've actually had the chance to digest it, of course, as it will be happening on the Sunday, I believe, starting at 8 p.m. However, of course, keep your eyes on that and make sure that you're following it on all of the different kind of Twitch channels. I believe there's going to be, I believe anyone can stream.
Yes.
Any channel which casted in the regular season is then allowed to cast again. However, I've been in discussion with Secret and they don't really seem very interested in doing the playoffs, so that might be me, Rip. But at the very least, we're going to be seeing it over at M&M Gaming UK with Mr. Beautiful Man Turbo over here. And definitely check him out, guys, and I'm sure it will be available on all of his social medias as to when he's going live. But as from us today, guys, that has been it from tonight's episode. We'll see you again next week at the same time and the same place of 8 p.m. now, remember. But of course, also to remember to keep your eye on the upcoming CPS tournament, which we'll also be discussing at some points throughout the next week, which will also be starting off this weekend with a qualification/seeding phase, which you will be able to find information about on esac.gg, and also hit up there if you are interested in hosting some events of yourself or checking out what else is going on in Trackmania. But anything else from you, Mr. Turbo? Do you care to send everyone away to their beds?
Yeah, I think just aiming for the 1 hour to 1.5 hour mark is good, because then we have also like a lot of topics to talk about next week. And I think it was just a very good episode. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next one and also to the Trackmania Grandleague. Unfortunately, you're not able to cast, which I found bad, but you will cast the Combine. And I think I'm going to cast it as well, because I think I'm just very interested in that. But yeah, we haven't talked about the Twitch rivals, but hey, doesn't matter too much, I think.
Oops.
I mean, yeah, it's more like a mainstream tournament. I think everyone got it there, so no need to recap it really. And I think just thank you again for the nice podcast today. Really nice talk. Really enjoyed it. And I think we're gonna send you to bed now. So that's us. That's it from our side. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.